Welcome to Sense of Style. I'm Stuart. Some fragrances are versatile and easy to wear. These are not that. These come with a presence and risk. They might turn heads for the wrong reasons or the right ones. Depends on what you're after. Some are dangerously seductive. Some are brash, bold, and some are downright polarizing. But they all make a statement. And if you wear them, own it. One of the most frustrating things to talk about on your YouTube channel is really expensive niche fragrances because most people haven't tried them. But if you're a collector, I really do think it's worth it to try. There's 4 niche fragrances, very expensive, and they're all at the pinnacle of their particular style. When it comes to seductive fragrances, the pinnacle of that is Musc Ravageur by Frederic Malle. This fragrance was designed for one thing in mind: sex. It is the most carnal fragrance I have ever tried by far, and that was the explicit intention of Maurice Roussel, the perfumer, who decided he did not want any pretty notes in the fragrance, including florals or anything that was very fresh. He wanted the fragrance to be as down and dirty as possible when he made this, so he did everything he could to limit those notes as much as possible. He wanted this to be built around 4 things: vanilla, spices, sandalwood, and musk. And even the spices here, it's centering around cloves. So you really get hit with a heavy, musky, spicy feel here. And this is definitely a very openly, brazenly sexual fragrance. This is a quote from Fragrantica. It's been upvoted almost 400 times. It's got words like rock star and porn star in it. And that makes it very clear the kind of message you're sending when you wear this. I've always been really puzzled by people who say, oh yeah, it's work safe. And I have seen that. You can wear it for work, but don't complain when you get called out. Because when it comes to clothing and fragrances, everything we're doing sends a message. Like if you're a young woman, they tend to complain about people criticizing them for what they wear. If you wear this, you're sending one message. And if you wear this, you're sending a completely different message. If you wear Musc Ravageur, you're sending this message. Fragrance number 2 is also a very seductive fragrance. However, it is not as brazenly seductive as Musc Ravageur. It is, however, constructed along similar lines. It's Prada Rossa Black. The construction here, as I said before, is the same. You're basically dealing with 2 pieces: musk, sort of an animalic side, and sweetness. So the darkness and the light, that does the same thing here. So the sweetness here is definitely toned down. You get vanilla, amber, and tonka in Musc Ravageur. In this, you're getting a toned down tonka note. They just use coumarin, so it's not the full tonka note, but it is still sweet. And you're combining that with amber, so it's definitely a sweet component. And then on the other side, you're getting musk, a lot of it, and angelica with just an herbal musky note. So you've got the muskiness and the sweetness constructed exactly the same way. Now, while the performance here is really good, the main problem that I have with Rossa Black is that I'm a Prada guy. It is my number 1 house. I love that clean, soapy, businessman aesthetic. However, every single other Prada fragrance really does kind of stick together and represents the Prada style. It's smooth, it's clean. This, on the other hand, definitely clean, but it's seductive. So when I wear all the other Prada fragrances, I'm kind of dressing like this. But when I wear this, it takes me away from the house of Prada, and I'm dressing more like this. The only fragrance where I've ever been criticized publicly was when I wore M7 Oud Absolu by YSL. But you know what? Just like all the other oud lovers out there, it's worth it to me. But I do have to be careful when I put this on, because this fragrance, even though it is a toned down version of the original M7, it pushes out like crazy. So the original M7 came out in 2002, and it was an absolute beast. It was a 24-hour performer, and it pushed out even more than this does. However, this fragrance was far more influential on popularizing oud for the masses. Because the original M7 was still relatively new, it took until this was released in 2011 for a lot of other houses to jump in and start having oud fragrances. And when you look at the fragrances released 2011 to 2015, that was peak oud, and a lot of it was because of this. The weird thing about the influence of this fragrance is the fact that it's not a balanced oud. There's no rose or saffron here. It's basically like a raw oud. So essentially you're getting oud, a lot of patchouli, there's mandarin note too, but not a huge amount of that. And then you're getting a lot of resins, you're getting myrrh and labdanum. So it's a mildly sweet, unbalanced oud, pushes out a lot, and yet it was a huge influence, and it remains to be very popular today. You got to be careful when you wear it though. Fragrance number 4 is Gucci Intense Oud. Definitely deserves the intense moniker here because it's quite an intense fragrance. It is also the most animalic designer oud that I've ever tried. Definitely a little barnyardy, and you're going to get that when you've got leather and oud together. Both notes have potential to be animalic, so no surprise there's an animalic chord here. The strange thing about it is it's quite smooth as well because the supporting notes are very fresh, and it makes it somewhat easier to wear. It is still animalic after all, but you get olibanum, saffron, and ambroxan. So those are fresh quality. The problem with the fragrance and the reason for the warning label in this particular case is that Alessandro Michele took over as creative director of Gucci in 2017. And aside from the very first fragrance he did, which was Gucci Guilty Absolute, which was a masculine beast, aside from that, every single thing he's released at the house of Gucci after that has been very unisex, very androgynous. You got the Memoire d'une Odeur line, and then you've got Gucci Guilty line, which is like full of white florals, namely in this case, orange blossom. So this came out 1 year before. So if you've been used to getting Gucci fragrances 2017 to 2025, and you see this and you think, oh, it'll be a nice androgynous oud, you'll be out of luck. This needs a warning label because this is like in your face, hyper masculine, lot of leather, lot of oud. Yeah, warning label for sure. So the next 4 fragrances are just flat out polarizing. There is no theme. They're love it or hate it fragrances, and you got to be careful when you wear them. And they're love it or hate it for different reasons. For instance, Dior Fahrenheit, it's a love it fragrance if you're sort of over 40, because it comes from a different time. It comes from a time when men were allowed to be much more masculine than they are now. And this is a very masculine and medicinal and therefore challenging fragrances for people that are not familiar with our culture. So what you're getting here is a combination of nutmeg, violet leaf, and a lot of leather, which gives an industrial sort of toxic, people talk about gasoline smell. I also think of it as smelling a little medicinal at times. But it's one of those scents that I think might smell like that, but I love it anyway. It pushes out really well. So this is one of those ones on the family picnic where it's going to be quite polarizing between generations. But if you're like me and you grew up with this, and even though I never bought this when I was younger, when I first smelled it, it was, yeah, I knew this for sure and I loved it. But if you're like me, yeah, this one's a keeper. Fragrance number 6 is Toy Boy by Moschino, and this one was meant to be deliberately provocative, from the advertising campaign to the actual bottle itself to even the scent. It's meant to be a very pungent rose, and they definitely pulled it off. There's no question. So it's like a rose, musk, and spices combination, but the spices are cloves. That's what I pick up more than anything here. There are a couple of others, but it's really heavy on the cloves. So it's quite pungent and quite difficult. A lot of people can't stand this. But the interesting thing about this is I just purchased a really expensive niche fragrance last week, and I put it on and I loved it. And I compared it to this. And the weird thing is after the first hour and a half, 2 hours, the dry down in this, and this lasts a long time, was surprisingly similar to this super expensive niche fragrance. So the deep dry down of this fragrance, like after 2 hours, once the cloves die down and that nasty stuff goes away, it's not bad at all. In fact, this is something that I'm reevaluating over the last couple of days because I love that new fragrance so much. And yeah, I mean, I know people hate it, but I really do. I really do enjoy the deep dry down of this. Number 7 is Café Tuberosa by Atelier Colognes, and this is definitely a pungent fragrance with a couple of twists. For instance, it is quite gourmandy, which is very much in style. It's got phenomenal performance and a reasonable niche price. But the white florals here are tuberose, which can be quite animalic, quite strong, quite pungent. Now for me, you mix that tuberose note with all of the gourmandy elements here, I love it. I think it's great, and it's super strong. But again, this is definitely not for everybody. But the gourmandy part here is underrated, because this is meant to smell like a Parisian cafe. So the tuberose, the flowers. Then you get a coffee note here, and it's also got a lot of sweetness like you would get with the pastries. So the sweetness is basically chocolate and vanilla, and the chocolate note here is fantastic. It's cacao and patchouli, and if you ever were unsure as to whether those two notes made up a chocolate smell, you should try this, because there's no actual chocolate note here, and it's great. But it is not for everybody. This is not a blind buy. This one really does belong on this list, but I love it, and I'm sure a lot of other people love it too. Fragrance number 8 is Creed's Viking, the third fragrance on this list to have cloves. That shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, seeing as cloves are quite pungent. However, this is more of a barbershop-y style old-fashioned fragrance than anything else. I would put this kind of in the category of Farenheit, where a lot of older people will like it, even though this came out in 2017. It still has an old-fashioned feel. It's built around the note of absinthe, which is an alcoholic drink that was very popular in Paris in like the late 1800s, early 1900s. There are a lot of spices in this, including cloves, as I mentioned. Then there's allspice, and then there's pink pepper. And then you get a mint and lavender combination that is very barbershop-y. Some people pick up the barbershop. Some people pick up the little booziness of the absinthe. It is pleasant. I really like it. It's also really strong performance, but again, doesn't fit the modern style, little bit old-fashioned. Because it's so strong, a lot of people will be like, what? You won't care because you like me, you'll like it. But anyway, yeah, definitely a list of polarizing scents, a list of scents that you do have to be careful when you put on, but like anything else in life, right? You know, you enjoy it, go for it, you know, just be wary. Anyway, thanks for watching.